So assuming that our database schema and our queries are in the right shape and form, we're going to transition to the application or middle tier. There are a number of techniques we can use to optimize this tier. One that gives us the most gain is output caching. So here in index.cshtml, which is our home page, I'm going to add the current datetime in this heading. Datetime.now.toString. This is just for demonstration. So watch what I'm doing. Save. Now I go back to the browser. So here's the current datetime. And if I refresh, you see the second changes. Okay? Now imagine behind this page, we're going to have a costly query, and our performance tests are showing that this is one of the slow pages in our application. Now, assuming that the data behind this page does not change that often, we can cache the output of this page, which is the rendered HTML. The first time someone visits this page, we'll query the database to get the data. ASP.NET MVC Framework will render the page and then store the rendered HTML in the cache. Next time someone visits this page, MVC Framework will serve this page from the cache, so the query will not be executed again. Now, to enable caching, here in Home Controller, I'm going to decorate this index action with output cache attribute. Output cache. So similar to the authorize attribute that you saw earlier, this is what we call an action filter. When we apply this to an action, it will be executed by MVC Framework before and or after the action, depending on how it's implemented. Or we can apply this to the controller, and this way it will be applied to all actions in that controller. Now here we can set a duration. Let's say 50 seconds. So I'm going to build, back to the browser, refresh. Okay, look at the time now. This page is now rendered and stored in the cache. But if I refresh again, the time doesn't change because this page is coming from the cache. Now we can cache the data on the server or on the client. If this view is specific to a given user, we put it on the client. Otherwise, we put it on the server. So here we can set the location property, which is an enumeration. Let's say output cache location.server. Another property that you might find useful at times is vary by param. Vary by param. So if this action takes one or more parameters and the output changes based on the value of these parameters, we can cache each output separately. So let's say in this action, we have a parameter called genre. I can add that here. So for every genre, we'll have a different version of this page in the cache. Or if we have multiple parameters, we can use an asterisk, which means for any combinations of these parameters, we'll have a different version in the cache. Now, as I said before, premature optimization is the root of all evils. So do not assume that a given page is going to be heavy and apply output cache here ahead of time. You're just going to shoot yourself in the foot. Do this only when your performance tests are proving that this page is slow and you will benefit from caching it. The downside of caching is that you may end up displaying stale data to the users. So for example, if we cache the list of customers and our staff member adds a new customer, they're not going to see it. And this is a terrible experience from the user's point of view. They don't care about our performance optimizations. They just can't stand an application that doesn't work reliably. Now, sometimes to prevent stale data from being displayed to the user, you may want to deliberately disable caching. Because different browsers have different caching policies, and at times they may cache the results of some of the requests to our application. If you're getting calls from the users telling you that the data is not updated, you need to ensure that caching is disabled on the corresponding actions. To disable caching, we use output cache attribute again, but we set the duration to 0. We don't need location. We set vary by param to an asterisk, which means for any parameters. And finally, we set no store to true. This will disable caching on that action. So this is output cache, which is for caching the rendered HTML. But sometimes we want to cache data, and that's what I'm going to talk about next.